Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to an early look at Cloud I/O, new tools to help you and your IT services keep getting better. My name is Jeremy Chapman. I'm a director on the Office 365 team. And the next 75 minutes, we're going to do something probably a bit different than the rest of the conference. We're going to talk about an idea that's really about best practices and things that we can do to make our journey, our experience with Office 365 better from an IT perspective. Just a few words about me. I've been in IT. I joined Microsoft. I started working on things like Microsoft Operations Framework, Windows Server System Reference Architecture, Business Desktop Deployment, or Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, if you know any of that stuff. Helped build and spec all of the click-to-run things for Office 365 Pro Plus. And for the last couple of years, about 2 years, I've been spanning the entire IT Pro gamut of technologies across Office, as well as Azure, as well as Windows Server, System Center, Windows Client, all these different areas. And I've got a fairly unique position in the fact that I can see all the new stuff as it comes into the pipeline and really present it at the deep level that you as an IT Pro care about. So what's new? Where do all these pieces fit? Now that unique perspective also gives me or affords me the ability to say, like, where do things fit in a continuum? So for example, things like Azure Active Directory, you can do simple things within Office 365, and it gets better as you start to add things like Azure Active Directory premium capabilities, Privileged Identity Manager, identity protection, etc. So for the next 75 minutes, what I'm going to do is talk about a new model that I'm working on, that a team with me is working on, called Cloud Infrastructure Optimization. Anybody remember infrastructure optimization from Microsoft a few years back? Couple of hands in the room. So basically that was saying, okay, given all the stuff that we're telling you, all the different technologies that we have and continue to release, how do I figure out where I should start? Where should I actually put effort? What makes the most sense for my company? What makes the most sense for my organization, my school? This is kind of where we're at today, because with the cloud, and I feel everyone's pain, there's so much stuff hitting, there's so many updates hitting you every single day, every week, every month, across all the services. What makes the most sense? So when you think about it, there's really so much coming at you. How do I basically see what you're doing now and what it takes to move to the next level and what makes sense in terms of what to configure? Now with this session, I'm also asking for your feedback. This is a world premiere. This is the first time we're presenting this content ever in Chicago for Tech Summit. So I want to get your feedback on the tech community for Breakout 2324. And let us know what you think, because there are lots of details in this. As you see, the deck will get progressively deeper and deeper and deeper. While we can't boil the ocean with every single configuration and setting that you can possibly use inside of Office 365 or Azure Active Directory, we're trying to keep it at the level that makes sense in terms of depth, and then eventually we'll provide more content in terms of what you actually do to control the different controls, the dials, the knobs that you'll have to set in order to get all these capabilities lit up, whether it's in your Office 365 or your Intune or your Azure AD tenants. So a little history. I talked about infrastructure optimization. We've seen a big shift. We've seen a huge shift in terms of these 3-year plus releases that we used to have going into cloud. And what that's meant is it's almost to the point where there's so many things hitting you, somebody needs to kind of step back, take an overall look, and see, okay, given all the stuff that I can do, all of these shiny objects, all of the things that are coming at me, all the different announcements that we're making every single week, how do I actually look at that and map that to something like a roadmap that I would use from an IT perspective to be able to implement that out to my users? But that isn't trivial, and even finding the information isn't always trivial. So when you think about gathering the information, there's all these different sources, and I would say all of these are very valid. If you don't know about all of these, it's actually in the deck, and we'll post the deck up on the community site. But the Office 365 roadmap, that has what's coming. That has the things that have been recently shipped in Office 365. The blogs, obviously, where we make the announcements about things that have just been released. any new capabilities in the Office clients. Those blogs go beyond Office, by the way, in terms of Azure blogs and a bunch of other blogs that we have. The Office blog I've linked here. Microsoft Mechanics, anybody know Microsoft Mechanics? So on YouTube, we actually have a channel called microsoft.com/mechanics, and we span all of Microsoft trying to give the newest tech capabilities for IT pros and what those things actually mean, how they work, how they run. And it does have a bit of instructional flavor to it in terms of how to get things working, how to think about some of the new technologies as they hit, or if there's areas of confusion, how to work through that confusion or demystify various areas of technology that we've released. We also have the Microsoft Tech Community, which is where you can go to actually access MVPs, access Microsoft staff, our engineering staff, as we talk about various technologies that we have across not just the cloud, but also Windows Server and Windows Client and Office clients. Microsoft events like this one, like Ignite, as I've got linked here, and then the Office 365 Message Center. So this is some place where you'd go to find all of the things that have been changed or that are going to be changed within your tenants. So all of these are very valid resources, but again, it's like information overload. So what is the thing that makes the most sense for me? So when you think about it, the problem isn't really just getting the information, because there's so much stuff there, and there are basically a lot of stakeholders that you have to work with in IT, and I've been there, I've done this as well, where you might have something that's not broken, so why fix it? How do I get users to actually care about what I'm implementing? How do I actually translate, and this is something that I've had to work on a lot, because I like to reverse engineer things and deconstruct things at a very IT level. How do I translate that to what it means for a business decision maker, or for somebody in the management staff, or for an end user that doesn't know what different user objects might be in a directory, or that doesn't care about the technical terms of getting Active Directory Federation up and running? How do I translate that into real speak for people and actually give them the upsides, the benefits as to what it means to implement or deploy certain things? And also what makes sense for my IT department, because I'm going to have some people, and I'll look at, I've talked to a lot of, say, investment banks that are on the bleeding edge that, 5 years ago they were in the bleeding edge of virtualization, now they're on the bleeding edge of cloud, and they've got all the IT money in the world to spend, down to sometimes government institutions, schools, et cetera, where their budgets are tight, they're constrained, they don't have all of the resources in IT, all the money, all the time, all of the kind of user buy-in to actually get technology enabled. And in that spectrum, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, I'm somewhere in between, I'm on the N-2 scale of kind of being back a few years, up to I'm on the bleeding edge. So how do I assess actually where I'm at? And then once I do that, how do I know what makes the most sense? And that's where Cloud I/O should come in. So Cloud I/O is about trying to figure out what state you're in today, what services you've deployed. Every single IT department's different. Jeffrey Snover likes to talk about snowflakes for servers, and they're all unique. And IT departments and IT services are like snowflakes. You're going to have different things configured, whatever IT situation you're in. Whether it's a hub and spoke model and you're a multinational company with IT departments spread throughout the world or throughout the country, or if you're a single departmental staff, maybe 2 or 3 people, you're going to have different things running, different things deployed, and different needs in terms of what your business or what your managers or what your stakeholders want to see. So what we want to do then is basically say, how do we deliver new IT services to be able to capture that always-on state in terms of things that we're continually releasing at Microsoft, as well as third parties beyond Microsoft. There are tons of different options that you have, on-prem and hybrid and full cloud options that make sense. You're at varying levels, again, of adoption of whether it's cloud technology or even on-prem technology sophistication or hybrid. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all recommendation. So what Cloud I/O wants to do is actually give you an optimal set of IT services that will meet your organization's needs, look at how well your services currently meet the needs of others, and also give you a path to get you where you are to where you want to be. So what does that actually mean? When we think about buying technology, and this is one of the things with Microsoft, especially, and we've seen it time and time again over the years, there's this kind of phase of, do I need something? And then there's been a lot of, especially with, as I used to do operating system deployment for a long, long time, I may have purchased the rights to do something, but I haven't implemented it. So I'm not getting any value from it. I've got this shelfware basically sitting there that I'm not actually using. So a lot of, when you think about the configurations in Office 365, whether it's things like data loss prevention, whether it's things like archiving, retention, using e-discovery controls, a lot of people are buying third-party stuff that augments kind of what might be built into Office 365, or you simply don't have the time to go in and actually configure different things, or you don't know all the different controls that are at your disposal that make sense, that might give me additional value. It might make my environment more secure, give users more stuff that they can use to prevent them from going out and buying maybe third-party collaboration tools and things that the IT department doesn't see or doesn't have control of initially. And these are all the things that you have to go and find and kind of rein back in, right? I mean, a lot of people will buy consumer stuff, and we call it bring your own IT or bring your own services. And I've been there. I remember the times where we found multi-terabyte databases under people's desks that weren't managed by IT. How do I find that stuff? How do I kill it? How do I get that back into management control? Why don't we just say, hey, we've got all this kind of inventory of stuff that we own that we can run, instead of everybody going out and finding kind of unique solutions to do things that might be consumer grade or might not have the management or compliance controls that you need. Let's figure out a way to actually get the capabilities that you already own into the hands of users. And then finally, when you get to the end, once we've got it kind of running at a basic level, and that's really getting it running at a basic level is what services that you might be familiar with, like Fast Track, will get you up and running very quickly and get people deployed into maybe Exchange or get people into SharePoint, get OneDrive for Business running, moving files off of file shares into OneDrive for Business. But then how do I go deeper and deeper into the configuration of what I can do? How do I configure all the different policies and all the different security controls, things like multi-factor authentication for at least my admins, to be able to get all the value that I can possibly get. So eventually I'm tailoring things to my specific needs. I'm actually building or getting apps maybe that extend my experiences in mail. So I'm actually hooking it into things like Salesforce or into SAP, for example. Those are the things that will actually get it more ingrained and get you more value and get users more excited about what they can do in the constructs of, say, things like Office 365. So really, it's about partly going from kind of the commodity implementation, the easy, the lights are on, mail's flowing, getting it up and running. Maybe I can authenticate from an AAD perspective, to getting more into kind of that upper right-hand quadrant of getting the most value out of the stuff that you're paying for. And so where that actually translates and how this gets real is, what if we had a scoring system? Anybody a gamer? Only a few people are gamers. So gamification of IT. How do I actually say, I'm at one level, maybe it's level 2, level 3, and I want to move to the next level, and I'm going to have different levels depending on which workload I'm actually working in, to move from maybe disjointed and ad hoc systems, connected but not architected, maybe they don't scale. When I have a big hit of, say, traffic, seasonal stuff, I'm in the tax business, it might be tax season. If I'm in retail, it might be holiday season. Architected and streamlined, where I'm basically doing things as best I can do. Everything's very well planned, very well architected. I have a change management process in place. Up to level 4, where it's actually agile and the system starts to give me recommendations back. Anybody that's seen some of the updates that we're making to, for example, the Security and Compliance Center in Office 365, we've actually started building the technology out to say, hey, we can use document fingerprinting inside of SharePoint. I know that because you're in the finance business, I can see things that will be important to you, 1090 forms, W-2s, anything like that. And we can say, hey, you've got 6,240 W-2 forms sitting here in this folder that isn't protected, that every FTE in your company has access to. Maybe you should think about locking that down. Those are the kind of things where the system can actually find those documents, find those things, and actually give you a recommendation that says, we're seeing stuff that might prevent risk. or that might give you risk, I should say, and we're going to give you a means to prevent that risk. So basically, the idea would be, once I assess kind of where I'm at along the scale for any given workload, I would then have tangible recommendations to move forward. And like I said before, this deck will keep getting deeper. I know it's very high and very theoretical right now, but we'll get deeper into the actual configs in a sec. All right, so what would happen in terms of how would I use this? So there was as I mentioned, there was a model called infrastructure optimization a few years back. Microsoft would come to you and say, I've got a survey questionnaire with 500 or whatever it was questions that would take you a long time to fill in. Well, there's better ways to do that now. The better way primarily is PowerShell and API so that we can actually do to go in and find the configurations that you have set, provided that you've got some services already running in the cloud. So what if we had an automated assessment that would actually go in, maybe not fill out every single question, but at least give you a baseline as to what statistically where you were at in any given area, because we could find the state. Now there's a tool that does this now called SecureScore, and I'm going to demonstrate that in a sec. But basically what that is doing is going and looking for stateful claims. So for example, how many admins do I have? What makes sense for the admin count in my company? It's probably not good to have one global admin, but it's probably bad to have more than 5. Are they using multi-factor authentication? Can I be owned at the admin level, which is a bad thing, by somebody who might phish my creds and come in as an admin who then can basically get the keys to the entire kingdom? So now we can actually do things like parse the statefulness of those types of settings. Do I have DLP policies configured? Am I using fewer email attachments and going to more centrally stored documents with auditing like OneDrive or SharePoint might give you to be able to know who's actually accessed certain files? All that stuff we would want to be able to measure and make sure that those pieces were getting used. And then translate that into what makes sense in terms of value. So if you went as IT and you said, hey, user group, finance department, HR, whatever, you guys really shouldn't be sending email attachments around with social security numbers and payroll information. If you're going to do that, you should lock the file down, store it somewhere centrally, and send a link to that file so that we know, A, who's accessed it, we can control who accesses it, and then we can audit it later. And if we have to do, maybe there's a legal case at some point, we can do an e-discovery or an in-place hold against that file. Makes sense, right? All these things, though, maybe what I just said sounds like a lot of gibberish coming out of my mouth as an IT person talking to an HR staff. So giving them basically what does that mean for me in terms of securing and locking down that information, and what benefits do they get? Building them the plan would be the next phase after we've already assessed kind of where you are and what things you have configured. So again, that machine assessment would lead into, okay, of all the things that we've assessed, you'll have multiple different workloads that you can address. Which ones do you want to move first? And a lot of people will say, I want to move security first, or I want to move messaging first, or geez, I'm really good everywhere, but my meetings are terrible. I'm only doing telephony, and I'm only doing conference bridge calls, and I don't do anything with video or desktop sharing, for example. How do I get that to be better? And then finally, how do I implement all this stuff? So beyond just kind of telling you from the mountain saying what you should be doing, why don't I just actually link you in to these controls to help you actually configure everything? Because we have direct links into Office 365 that will work basically once you're authenticated in as an admin, you can actually see where that configuration is set. So for example, if I do say, maybe you should reduce the number of global admins in your tenant. You've got 16. Your company only has 50 users. That makes no sense. But the 16 made sense because maybe a bunch of people wanted reporting about health of the service because they complained they couldn't get to their email or something one day. These kind of things happen. But this would give you a means to go in and actually say, okay, where do I go in and maybe demote some of my global admins to either other admin levels or standard users in my tenant? So how do we give you implementation guidance, and if at all possible, how do we make that implementation guidance live in terms of clickable links that will get you right to those positions inside of Office 365 or inside of Azure AD that will let you set that, or in cases where I might need PowerShell to do it, give you that PS1 file that you can actually use to apply that setting in your tenant. And then finally, how do I track usage metrics? So let's say It's one thing to say I've got, whatever, multi-factor auth enabled for one person, but if that's my thing I want to have for all end users, I want to measure my level of implementation, my level of usage, in terms of making sure that everybody's getting value from that. So those would be all the pieces in terms of the model. So anybody see SecureScore or anybody on the preview yet? No? All right, not too many people, so this will be new to you. So SecureScore does a version of this. Imagine kind of all the stuff I've been talking about, but just scoped to security and compliance. Now right now, if you're logged in as a global admin on a tenant, which I am in a demo tenant here, it actually gives me a score. So what does that score mean? That 56 basically tells me you have, based on what you can do, up to 243 points that you can earn in terms of setting and configuring things in your tenant. Now we've gone in and looked at all the different security and compliance settings, and I can scroll down and show you some of them. Everything there on the left. If I hit show all, it will even enumerate more stuff. But all of these things are basically things that you'd want to do to lock down your tenant and make it more secure and make sure that you hit the compliance targets you might have. One of the interesting factoids, compare your score. 56 is what my demo tenant has. It's what, if you provision a demo tenant using the Microsoft demo tenant infrastructure, you get 56. The average is 19. So if you have multi-factor auth enabled for admins, you get 50 points. So the average out there is actually quite low in general in terms of all the security and config settings that have been set. What this will do is it'll actually say, if you start setting these different configurations, if you start saying, I want you to enable, for example, let's just go in multi-factor auth for global admins, it will assign a score for that. The maximum point value it will give you is 50 points if all your admin accounts are multi-factor auth enabled, which makes a lot of sense. There are some cases where, and there's a PowerShell thing where the PowerShell scripting admin will need to have single-factor auth in cases because PowerShell can't handle the iframe that does the second factor. Maybe you provision the account bespoke for that one session, then you remove that account from global admin access just to do that one scripted thing to where it doesn't have standing permissions. But you can have a variation. You could have, say, for example, 40 out of 50 if you still needed that scripting account and you locked that one up as much as you could so it could never be phished, hopefully, for a PowerShell scripting account. Multi-factor auth for all users. There are some things here that you'll see, and I'll just zoom in because I know it's hard to see in the back. Some things that are called not scored. And what this means is there's ongoing work to actually query the statefulness of the items in your tenant. So some things we can tell from a usage and logging and auditing perspective as to whether or not there's traffic for these given areas. So enabling data recording, audit data recording, isn't currently a setting that we track from a stateful check perspective. I can't go into PowerShell and do a get command to see what the state of that setting is. In the future, we will be able to. So we still have it in the model as something that we can score. Likewise, things like reviewing sign-ins after multiple failures and getting a weekly report, something like that. Again, currently, there's no way to actually get a stateful query against that setting in your tenant, but these are all things that are in scope for things that are coming. So I'd be able to see, what my state is there. So if we keep going down, reviewing sign-ins from unknown sources, reviewing sign-ins from multiple geographies. You always see these impossible logins. How did I get from California to Moscow in less than a day, and all of these types of things. We'd be able to report against that. Whether or not things like information rights management has been configured. There's just a bunch of stuff, that from a security standpoint would make sense. So I think as you're looking at this, I think a lot of these will be things that maybe you've set, or at least you can nod your heads and say, yeah, these will be things that will, in some way, make my tenant more secure. And then once I'm done with SecureScore, once I start to move down the pipeline of doing more and more stuff, and you can see mine has been static at 56, I can see how my score will raise over time to see what that looks like, and I can query that by basically how many days I want to show, how many months, how many weeks. And then I can see exactly what I want to set, what I've recently set, everything right here in terms of completed actions, and then incompleted actions, things I might want to look at. So this gives me kind of that report card about security, though. This will tell me what things I've done, and this is something that is in preview right now. Anybody with an Office 365 tenancy can basically go to securescore.office.com, and that score will be there waiting for you. There's nothing to even enable. It runs as a batch process every single night. I don't know the exact time or what time zone it runs, but it runs as a batch process every night that will continue to re-up that score on a daily basis. And this is pretty interesting, I think. Anybody does that make sense in terms of something that you'd use? Right? A few people. But why do I need to limit that to security? So security shouldn't just be the limit. I want to be able to see, like, how well am I doing meetings? How well am I doing collaboration? How well are other aspects of the technology that I own actually performing? And that's where, again, as we go back into Cloud I/O, where that will come into play in terms of not just scoring your security. Security will be a component, but how do I score across other vectors, other things in my environment? So for example, having a way to send or share files. And if you're in the Office division or you've been a long-time SharePoint person, you think that just sounds like it's only SharePoint. I'll tell you what, most people are probably sharing their files as email attachments, and it happens a lot, right? If I want to get an Excel spreadsheet to my neighbor who's beyond walking distance away from me or somebody outside my company, what am I using? Email. So we have to put that as part of the spectrum too. So I have to measure how much are we using things like OneDrive for Business or Box or Dropbox. How much are we using things like email to be able to transport files? And if I am using email, am I doing anything with information rights management to at least protect those files if they're attached and they're super important to me? So how do I actually figure out where I'm at across all these different areas inside the workload of sending and sharing files? And how does that map to what I actually have inside of Office 365 or what I might own as part of enterprise mobility and security features that I might own to be able to get, for example, not just multi-factor auth and maybe Active Directory Federation services running, but how do I even go further to do things like privileged identity management to say whether or not I have, maybe too many admins, or I've seen anomalous behavior in terms of logins, and I want to actually provide a second factor of auth because this person never ever logged in from that device before, or never logged in from that part of the world before. These are things that Azure AD Premium, the EMS stuff, will actually give you that maps along a continuum, so it goes beyond what you can do just in Office 365. Same thing for security. So we have stuff that you can do right now in Office 365 as you get to the advanced stuff, advanced security management, things like customer lockbox, et cetera. Those will get you even further in terms of getting down that security funnel. And that you saw actually, and I'll go back to SecureScore for a sec. In SecureScore, this tenant actually has E3 in this case, so the possible score is 243. But if you had something that has all the advanced security capabilities and you own all of those capabilities, you can get to 450. So that's, again, another indication of what it would look like to have kind of the basic security controls to the more advanced security management and other capabilities in place. So the other important part, and this is what I mentioned earlier, we can all speak IT language, I think. A lot of us have been in IT for years. I've been doing it since the 1990s, mid-1990s. And I like to reverse engineer stuff. I like to debug things. I like to find out where the actual issues are. Some people will say, I've coined the term the patience of an IT pro, because you have a bit more forgiveness in terms of knowing how things actually work and where things would have broken, whereas the average user is like, my computer doesn't work. What do you mean your computer doesn't work? I can't get to email. Okay, so it turns on, it does all this stuff. It doesn't work because you have no internet connectivity. Have you tried flipping on the internet connection switch that's on the base of your laptop? Oh, no, I didn't try that. Oh, I guess you're in airplane mode still from your flight yesterday. Oh, that's why my email's not working. These are the things where we, as IT pros, we have a lot more patience and we can kind of figure it out and troubleshoot that thing, usually pretty quickly, where a normal person's just like, I hate this device, it's not connecting, it's broken, it's not able to do what I want it to do. So how do I translate stuff that makes sense to me my security view or my service view about providing tools and services and configurations and all this stuff to actually things that make sense to maybe the business stakeholders or things that make sense to end users. So part of this tool is actually something hopefully that's somewhat novel. Every sentence that I write has a unique identifier from a database structure perspective where it has a mapping of the technical term and the one that makes sense to somebody who's not technical. So that way I can actually toggle between, here's the control that I want to set to be able to enable, let's say, multi-factor authentication. Everybody in the room knows what that means. If I say that to my wife, my mom, she doesn't know what that means, right? So how do I actually say, this will prove who you are by asking you for another thing, for example, your fingerprint, to be able to log you into your service, to be able to log you into email. Ah, that's what that means. So why is that better than a password? Let me tell you. So how do I actually explain things at the level where they maybe aren't as tech savvy to be able to actually get people on board, both at the kind of management level as well as at the end user level, because I want to be able to take anything that I'm doing and translate that to something that makes sense for people that actually need to use the technology later. So what we want to do is provide this tailored and kind of up-to-date technical recommendation. Again, up-to-date because there's so much stuff hitting you all the time based on your current capabilities and what you want to achieve. And what that will eventually look like, and I'll show you a kind of an early mock-up of stuff that doesn't exist yet. It will be something that hopefully aligns with all the different things that we have now that basically helps you in terms of getting, figuring out whether or not you want Office 365 or various things at maybe the sales level, which is what Value Discovery Workshop is, if you're familiar with that. The secure score level, which I just showed you in terms of getting your security and compliance settings figured out. And Fast Track, which again lets you implement stuff quickly to help you get services up and running as fast as possible. So let me just show you kind of an early mock-up of what I want to do and what we're trying to build with Cloud.io. And then I'm going to go into the deeper actual recommendations, the real configurations, and that zoom level, which is kind of zoom level 1. Then we'll zoom in later, I won't say today, but later in terms of the configs that will map to that. So first imagine you're going to the website. The one thing that you'd want to do and that you'd have to do is say, I've got to log in, because logging in basically will let us access your tenant configs to be able to actually perform the assessment in real time, things that you'll be able to do to see what things you've got configured. Remember all those state PowerShell commands that I'm going to do to run and actually find out what things I've got configured, all the way to APIs I might be able to call to see what things that you have running as well. So once you log in, you would actually get some kind of a level. All of this right now doesn't exist, just to be clear. Right now, we're not even building the tools yet. This is just an early mock-up, an early indication of kind of what we're planning to do. So imagine logging in, and think about it. I've got multiple different workloads. I talked about sending and sharing files. I haven't talked about day-to-day communications. Core services will be things like identity authentication, and then meetings and broadcasts and those types of things, and more that we'll see in a sec. So this will basically say, okay, of all the stuff I have running, my average score is 2 out of 4. And it will kind of give you an indication of which things, where things lie. Will give me an indication of what things I can actually work on. And as I click into any of these workloads, I'll see what I have configured based on what the tool tells me. I can give it additional information if the tool can't tell me whether or not I've got something configured. Again, because not every stateful thing is instrumented quite yet, but it will get there. And then it will actually tell me what different areas I can work on to get further down that optimization funnel. So now this is the meaty part. It's too bad some of the folks left already, but this is where it gets hopefully a bit more interesting from an IT pro standpoint. So, and this is an eye chart, so I think I'll zoom in. So just to kind of go down the different paths of these things. So if we think about authentication, we have the concept of single sign-on, which I think most people are familiar with. A lot of people, will say a company or I am cloud mature because I use 5 different services. If all 5 services have different usernames and passwords for every user that accesses those services, is that a good thing? Probably not, right? You don't want to have 5. There might be a security argument for it, I guess, if you hack the password of one thing and then you don't know the other 4. But my guess is in those cases, the user is probably reusing their password across the different services they might use. So I might have SSO running in my local AD, so every user object is using the same password or the same factors to authenticate, smart card, whatever, but I've only got one factor. So while I've got that running, it could be better. So when I get to level 2 is where I'm saying I've got some means of syncing my local directory service, whether that's directory synchronization, password hash sync, or ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services. I have some means of saying my local directory is somehow mirrored in the cloud somewhere, whether it's with Microsoft or not. And that way people can use the same means of authenticating into the service, whatever they want, whatever they want to access. I'm providing tokens to be able to get you into Office 365 or Exchange Online. Those are the same creds that you would use, or at least the same email, the same user principal name that you would use to get into your on-prem stuff. But at level 2, I'm saying at least admins need multi-factor auth. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of those things where multi-factor auth is going to protect the keys to the kingdom. If I have your admin creds and I can phish those, I can own your entire tenant. I can probably own other stuff as well, but you'd be surprised. And again, think of that average score of 19, whereas 50 is provided for anybody that has MFA turned on for admins. The average score means that a lot of people aren't using MFA right now. So that means there's a lot of admins, global admins, that basically can do anything inside of Office 365 that are only using a password to log in. As I keep going down the funnel, oops, that's not where I wanted to go. Hold on. As I keep going down the funnel, then I'll see that MFA gets extended down to end users. Let me just show you where I'm looking. Can go down to end users, and then eventually it gets to where I've got conditional access to actually look beyond the user and look at the device, look at their location, look at things that look anomalous in terms of logins. The system can then, and this is what some of the Azure AD Premium stuff will do, the system can then prompt you for another factor of authentication or ask you to reset your password even if you've got MFA turned on when it sees something weird, when it sees something that looks like risk. So for example, I'm here on my Surface Book. Maybe I log in with a Surface Pro or a Spectre 360 or something, and I'm in a different city. Hey, I've never seen that device. I've never seen you log in from Chicago. I'm going to ask that you actually reset your password and do something to prove that you are Jeremy Chapman before I let you get access to services. These are things that, again, would span that continuum, and this level 4 stuff, in this case, isn't stuff that's necessarily native to Office 365, but that you can get. Likewise, in terms of people and resources, having more than one directory in use would be level 1. User and directory information is primarily accessed by email and includes contact details and organizational information. Eventually it goes to integrate a directory service for people across apps and services use, so things will show up in other contexts. Then the directory can be federated with partner directories, so we have this capability through things like Active Directory Federation Services, for example, and being able to see other people that are outside of my organization, their presence, et cetera. Those are the things that you can get as you get up higher in level. So my partner communications, for example, get better. And then meeting rooms and things start to be managed like user objects or resource objects inside your directory. And as I get to level 4, that directory information is linked pervasively throughout my apps, throughout anything that's looking for presence. I can easily elevate, or escalate, I should say, from a chat thing to a phone call to a video conference, and it just becomes easy. And these are all kind of productivity things that we can get running as part of just core capabilities. So what you do, and this is kind of a rough indication of what we do now because I don't have the online tool built, is you can actually say what looks the closest to what you're doing now. I have on-prem AD. I have single sign-on working there, but I have a different sign-on working in the cloud, and I've got Cloud ID maybe from my IT department and a few users in marketing that wanted to have a OneDrive-like solution. So that's where I would assess myself at level 1, but I want to get to level 3 where I can eventually get people on multi-factor auth. Why? Maybe there's been a data breach. Maybe I've had a leak of data in my my management saying, we need to do something to protect data. What's the best thing that you can recommend at this stage? MFA, even though it's behavioral change for a user, right? I've got to provide my fingerprint or another factor or use my phone or whatever to log in. That's going to heighten your security exponentially, which is why it's the first thing in the secure score in terms of recommendations for admins, and the second thing in terms of recommendations for end users. Likewise, if I kept going, identified myself as to what my current state is for people and resources, and then what my desired state would be. Compliance, same thing. All of these I can do, at least at a basic level, using the PowerPoint that I've got here. Now this is where hopefully we've done our jobs to start to translate these to more business-friendly terms. So we have to be on site or connect using virtual private network or VPN to access our business apps. That might be still a little bit too technical, so I might even up-level that a little bit more. For any internet-based apps, we set up accounts with different passwords for each app. So again, every single sentence that I might have that would be more the text speak of the thing, we would have a mapping or corresponding sentence that is the kind of non-text speak so that it's easier to convey like what you're working on. What are you doing? What are you bringing to my user group? Or maybe I'm the person that owns all productivity app experiences for my users, but I have no idea what Config Manager does to get those packages deployed. Okay, well, here's how you'd actually articulate what's coming. So we do that across all these different levels, basically. So that would help you then not only assess where you want to go and what makes sense and what kind of the target is in terms of capabilities that you want, but also it'll help you in terms of going and having a coffee with your manager or your end user group or whatever and saying, hey, we've got some good changes coming. This is all the stuff that we're working on. What do you think of this? And hopefully this translation helps, because I've certainly been there where I want to do something that will actually look like pain to an end user, and they're like, oh, that's a config change. I've got tax season coming. How dare you even recommend doing something within IT that's going to actually impede my ability to do my work? If you go to them with a nice carrot that's logical, that makes sense, hopefully, not always, hopefully that helps at least get them on board. And that's what we want to do in terms of having this kind of business view and translation for different stakeholder groups. So likewise, we've got continuums around all the other workloads that I mentioned. I'm calling them scenarios, but I could call them workloads. Sending and sharing files, as I mentioned. And this is stuff that's probably pretty familiar to people. Ability to block receipt of harmful attachments by file type or file name extension. Hopefully everybody's blocking things like .exe files going out and coming in via transport. Message encryption service enabled for secure storage of sensitive messages. Rights management's enabled to be able to restrict the dissemination of messaging and attachments. DLP, data loss prevention, starts to look for sensitive information types, credit cards, tax forms, those types of things. Things that would constitute sensitive info that shouldn't be sent usually as an email attachment, right? And then as I get further along, that stuff starts to, let me zoom back out and into this corner, as it's been a bit slow on this machine. Document fingerprinting. So that's where I can actually scan and parse documents based on the contents of the document, make logical inferences as to whether or not I need to auto-classify that document. And the system is basically telling me, hey, I got something that looks like a W-2 form, or hey, I've got something that looks like a different form, maybe a design R&D spec sheet that you might use to actually design a component for your car or your motorcycle that you're building. These types of things, I'd be able to just do a fingerprint of that based on other templates I might have, and then it will detect that for me and tell me, hey, you should be setting up rules in data loss prevention. Likewise, the same types of recommendations would then go through from a file sharing perspective, and I say file sharing, this is more native, kind of what you'd think of when you think of SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, going from file shares, file servers, something a lot of people do. What do file servers and file shares not have? If I have map drives and I've got like ransomware that comes in, what can those map drives do? It can go in the ransomware, it can go and encrypt all these files. And there was a big case for this, I think, in a school in LA, where basically all these students that had map drives and ransomware came in and it basically encrypted everything. Once you have something like a SharePoint or a OneDrive running and you're not using file shares as dependently, you'll still have cases to use them, but then you have things like versioning, et cetera, that will let you get back to the previous version before that malware came in and tried to encrypt stuff, or maybe that malware couldn't have reached it because of it not being a map drive, but part of your most recently used document list, part of an HTTP path versus a map drive on your system. Then we get to eventually into auditing and log search, things that you can do towards level 3 as we get into level 4, where advanced security tools actually monitor and look for anomalous activities, and the system provides a means to actually revoke access if a detachment is sent out using information rights management, for example. Even if it's sitting on the hard drive of the recipient's computer and that recipient is malicious, if I have the document IRM protected and he can authenticate into that file, I can kill it at any time. So that's where, again, even though in this case I'm talking basically to, I can use it in OneDrive or SharePoint as well, but I'm talking to an email case typically in terms of file sharing. Even if the file's gone out, I have a means of protecting that. So part of what's needed there, though, is the classification that maybe something like a DLP would be able to do to then prompt that RMS application onto that file, and then when it is sent out, it's got the right meta tags on it to be able to be protected as it goes out in email transport, and then I have the ability to revoke access after it's arrived. So these are all the things that we've got in terms of the current mapping. So these are day-to-day communications, audio and video telephony, messaging, enterprise social. The core services that you see on the bottom here, these are always going to be about your authentication and identity and compliance stuff that's kind of shared by every single workload that you might be using. Same thing, so when I look at, for example, day-to-day communications, audio and telephony, I might be using an old PBX, and this is pretty common. I have an old PBX, I can do some internal redirecting of calls. I might only have a conference bridge, I've got a conference line plus a conference ID that I have to type in every time, and then that will eventually get to where I can start doing these types of calls through a web client or through a Skype client. For example, something that I do a lot, and it's still safe and legit, is one click to join in a Skype meeting, for example, using my phone app. That goes through my car's Bluetooth, and I can be on that meeting without having to know the conference ID, the bridge number, and all these things that might cause a car accident. I can just hit join, and then I join the meeting. So you see things like, or you see companies like BMW actually starting to integrate those type of capabilities into the cars that they're building, because it has to be that level of seamlessness in terms of getting into those meetings. So going again from level 1, where I might have conference bridges, up to level 3 or level 4, where all of this stuff is basically pervasive, one-click join to get into meetings, to be able to do things a lot easier. And this is something that you can sell to end users if you don't have it now. Messaging-wise, we also have day-to-day communication Stripe for that, as well as social if you're using things like Yammer or other tools, how those would actually progress from level to level. So the whole point of all of this, again, as I go through all these different capabilities, we'll have meetings and broadcasts and all of that with different levels across the spectrum, across a couple of different areas. And then we have information publishing and discovery, the stuff that you do to actually get content out to your employees or to other workers. All of these effectively have four different levels of how you might implement them, hopefully based on reality and things that you're doing now, all the way up to where it can go, where the system can actually be giving you recommendations back. And that's really what level 4 is about, is trying to harness some of the log parsing that we can do across some of the more advanced solutions and giving you recommendations back. So again, thinking about like what I was talking about earlier with Security and Compliance Center, being able to tell you, hey, I see 4,000 different tax documents. You should really think about setting up data loss prevention policies against that. Here I've got, for example, media content and discovery. Maybe your video system should be able to do captioning and translate that into other languages automatically, so you don't have to worry about A, accessibility, or B, having to cater to various language needs that you can't maybe hire from a localization standpoint. So these are all tools and technologies that exist today that would move you from basic media delivery of videos, for example, that might be on FTP shares or might be custom bespoke SharePoint experiences, all the way to where I'm using native stuff, that have mobile apps, that have things like automatic captioning, that have things like automatic translations. And that would be when I get to my kind of level 4 implementation of those types of technologies. So again, any of these things I'd be able to, from a workload level, say, I really want to nail security, I really want to nail the meetings bit, go after that, and then be able to move on from item to item until I've worked through all the different workloads that I have. Reporting, this is something about business intelligence, planning, getting all the reporting information to users. That one, we have a lot of really cool tools for in terms of things like Azure Analysis Services, Power BI, et cetera. How do I go from maybe a SSRA or SQL Server reporting services type environment where it's very static and very columnar in terms of the reports, up to where I've got something like Power BI running, and then even expanding on Power BI up to where I've got like Azure Analysis Services powering Power BI at the back end, where I can do really big data crunching, all of that again on a continuum. So all of these things basically we've looked at all the kind of logical starting points, the logical ending points, and all the different steps in between to get from level 1 to level 4. There's co-authoring, here's change management. I won't read through all of them because they're all actually available on the website, but you can start looking through these. And you can start, if you wanted to, self-identifying where you stand, like I did in the first couple of slides, and where you want to go, and then you'd have all the different capabilities that would go there. All right, so what does this then translate to? And you saw a very rough early mock-up of where I want the tool to go in terms of your initial splash screen experience. But think about taking that to the next level. So I have the detailed recommendations that go from level 1 to level 4 with each different level actually documented. Then I would be able to create reports that could go to IT as well as business stakeholders for the non-technical views and the executive summaries and those types of things. That's kind of more the documentation stuff that will probably be outputted as a PDF or some kind of file. But more importantly, it'll be more like a hands-on lab underneath. So let's say after I've detected I want to get to level 4 in security, print me all the things that I have to go into my tenant and configure. Because you're able to find state of all these different things, and you might have augmented some of that state with things that couldn't be detected through PowerShell or API. But what controls and where do those map in my tenant? And if possible in those cases, is there a direct link to that spot in the portal that will actually let me configure those changes? So to go back to my SecureScore example, hopefully my session hasn't logged out yet. But one of the things that this team did that's really cool is I actually have Learn More buttons. My session did expire, I knew it. All right, let's try it again. At least I predicted it would have expired. So it wasn't really a failed demo. All right, so here I can actually see what does MFA mean for global admins, and I can launch that, and hopefully all of my stuff is re-authenticated and happy. And I'll be able to get straight to, and you can see it's waiting for Azure Active Directory. Here's the MFA actual settings and config that I can do, and I can go in and actually turn on MFA for the admins that are in my tenancy if I want. Obviously, if I've got 10,000 people in there, I'll want to use search and get to the admins that are in there, or search by people that have global admin creds. But these are the things that I can do straight from the recommendation set, so I don't have to actually hunt through TechNet or MSDN or whatever documentation to get to that control. I want to link to it straight from the documentation and the web tools that I provide. So if you do want to start enabling this stuff, it's actually direct linked through the documentation. That's really the goal of what we want to be able to build. And we want to make sure that we're using links that we can redirect targets and stuff so that as pages evolve and maybe the hyperlinks change over time, that we'll be able to make sure those continue to work. So that's another thing that we want to have as kind of the underlying, I'd say level 2. Level 1 is the high level stuff that you're going to want to go from level to level. Level 2 will be the underlying configs that you have to actually set, and whenever possible, how do I get you to that config directly inside of your tenant? And here we're linking to actually Azure AD, not technically Office 365, but Office 365 will work as well. So it'd be, portal.office.com, and then the actual tag that will get you into that site experience, whether it's things like customer lockbox or data loss prevention policies, security and compliance center, productivity settings, Exchange Admin Portal, those types of things. So I can go straight to that control that I want to be able to set. If I want to configure IRM for email, that's directly linked to me with exactly the setting, kind of things that you'd want to think about in terms of if there's 2 or 3 levels of what you would set. So that's something that I don't have built yet, but that's something that will come hopefully in the July timeframe, to where you can go in, you can self-assess, or maybe a Microsoft person can help you, or a partner or whatever. Then you'll have this kind of rough score of, where we can ascertain state. Where we can't ascertain state, you'll go through security or survey questions, and then it will provide you reports as well as detailed recommendations as to what to configure. So hopefully that was a tour of the things that we're actually building. Again, this is the first time that we've presented this publicly. I've been working on it since around the June timeframe with a collection of people across the Office team and the Azure team to actually get some of the stuff up and running, working with our field teams as well to make sure that our technical field can actually articulate what all this stuff is. Does this look useful to anyone out there in terms of being able to help? A couple people. If you're listening at home, that's every hand raising. No. So hopefully as you see it and it gets more fleshed out and it gets more rich in terms of experience and all the different levels of recommendation, all the different assets that it will output from a documentation standpoint, and all the ways to filter and slice and dice on the views, the workloads, all of that stuff, you'll see even more of it getting real. It's hard presenting something like this when it's still in the ideation phase, because I don't have a fully fleshed out web tool that I can kind of walk through every single screen and every pane of. But once it gets to that point, and I'll say optimistically dev on that, we've started it from a database and infrastructure standpoint already, but dev on all the front end and wiring everything up will probably be something that will happen in the March to June timeframe. But these will be things that you'll be able to use, hopefully, as we get into the summer timeframe, to where you can actually start getting value and seeing this content light up, like we have with SecureScore now. SecureScore, you'll see more information on that coming in the coming weeks and months. I'd encourage you, if you want to go look at SecureScore, it's just securescore.office.com once you're logged in as an admin. And you can see a flavor of kind of what we're doing with the Cloud I/O work, scoped, again, to security, but we'll want to extend that beyond purely what security can do. So with that, I'll conclude my outbound presentation, and hopefully you guys have some questions and some feedback that I can use, and I will actually, this is the time, I'll actually build it into the tool if it's good feedback. I'm taking that now. If it's really terrible feedback, I hate you and I want to fly home, or any of that kind of stuff, maybe I won't build it in. But let me know if you've got any feedback here, what makes sense, things that are maybe that you saw that are missing, things that would give you more value. Just if you will, I think there might be microphones in here, otherwise I'll repeat the question so that you can hear it at home. Any questions? Yes? Mm-hmm. So I think the question or the feedback is, as long as I have direct link back to where I set that configuration, it's more valuable to you? Yeah. Okay. So that I think is the crux of, like, that's why arguably the older model, where we went and just did a pure survey and then hoped that this just documentation pure thing would work to get you to move up the different levels of IT optimization. Hopefully this, with the actual configs and the kind of almost hands-on lab experience later in the auto detection and the auto state detection, will help make it more real and more usable, more tangible, more wired into what you can actually configure and change. Anybody else? Yes? This question is going to be a premium service. At the moment, no. This will be something that probably initially there will be a Microsoft person that will help you through it before we release a public UI for it. But the idea is that anybody can get to it eventually. Maybe in July it will be fields, so you might need to be a managed account or part of Fast Track or something. But then after that, it'll be a public thing. That's at least the current plan. Any other questions? No? Oh, yes? So I'd love to have PowerShell where it can be done to actually configure that. There will be point and click to the site if we can link to that. You'll see even in SecureScore there are certain capabilities where you can only do it via PowerShell. So what Brandon's done, the PM for that team, is he's actually listed that PowerShell file and that script up on the community. So he's got a site for each one of those things, and we direct link to the PowerShell script. In a perfect world, we'd have both. We'd have, here's the script, and here's the UX link that will get you to the portal. So yes. Yep.
Then from developer or technical perspective, the guy who do the coding, this says, different infrastructure settings. How could you please try to make me understand how that directly links to me? It sounds more for infrastructure guy to do office settings with different coding. But as a developer or software engineer, how that relates to me or us?
So the question is, if I'm a dev, how does this relate to me as the dev to be able to get to these things that are configured? The APIs will be, or actually the SecureScore API will be published soon. So that, if you want to get statefulness of certain features that you might want to take advantage of from a dev perspective, there will be cases where certain services are turned on or turned off that you might want to actually use as you're developing a mail app or something that, an add-in that extends what Exchange Online or other things can do. So yes, there will be a dev story. I would say we're more catering to IT, just because 90% probably of the usefulness of this will be to the person that's configuring the admin portal settings. But from a dev perspective, you're going to want to know if the state stuff I think is super interesting as a dev. If you're writing code that requires state to be turned on and you've got an API that will actually let you parse that or query that, then that's a good thing. You just have to talk your IT pro into giving you the right credentials to be able to assess the service state and the actual configuration if it's turned on or not. Because there will be a level of authentication required to even access this information. So it will be an admin-only access. You can't do it as an end user. So the dev would need some kind of an admin cred or do over the shoulder, work with the admin to say like what states have been enabled, disabled. It'll probably be easier to find it here in a lot of cases than it might be to hunt and peck around in the actual portal or try to use PowerShell get commands to try to enumerate the states that you have. So yes, for state detection, I would say it's good for devs. For the dev thing is impossible though from an optimization standpoint because there's so many different paths you can take from like, is something written well or is it written poorly? I don't even want to get into the business of trying to assess that from an app perspective because I've tried that and it's almost impossible. But I think from a IT security and config and productivity config setting standpoint, these are things that can be linearly assigned to some extent. So hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? Yes?
Some feedback. I like what you were talking about as far as the gaming mindset, kind of taking you from stage one and ranking you up.
Yep.
Have you thought about tying that to like maybe your Microsoft account? Like, so I'm a SharePoint admin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm working at my company and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take us from stage 1 to stage 4, and I'm the primary admin, can I tie that, to my Microsoft account so it shows my credentials, to the community, something that I can carry that with me going forward? Because like you said, Xbox, right? Everybody wants to talk about how many achievements did you get in
Right.
this game, and that's something that you can show, you can share, you can put on your account,
Mm-hmm.
as your credentials. Somehow tie that back to your Microsoft profile to say, look, I took this from stage 1 to stage 4.
Mm-hmm.
On these different genres, I have this amount of credentials.
Yeah, so if you're listening on the recording, question is whether or not I can tie back the achievements I've made moving from level 1 up to level 4, for example, as an admin so that I can have other people see it. I hadn't had that thought, but I think it's a good one. The challenges might be, PII, privacy information going from your org ID into your Microsoft account, your MSA Live ID kind of account. There's probably a way that we could do it. that would just maybe at a very anonymized way say, moved this workload from level 1 to level 4, but you don't have any other kind of information about your company or other stuff. We would want to be as protective of any kind of information or privacy areas as we could be. So it'd be up to you then as the MSA or Microsoft account holder to say you work for Contoso or whatever and you moved, messaging from level 1 to level 4. Maybe we could do something that like verifies that statement, but I don't know if we would do something that would say like all the details around it, for example, other than maybe the badge. But that could be something potentially. I can say that it's a difficult control to configure. Just from me getting the engineering buy-in to build that would be an insurmountable or perhaps an insurmountable mountain to climb. So let's say if it gets super popular and everybody's like, this is cool, it's almost as good as having an MCP, then I could make that argument and say like, there's 10,000 people using it, they really want this. Can we somehow wire that together with the MSA so that your MVP status could say that? Maybe we could do it with tech community because that's org ID linked. So at least in tech community, you'd have your picture and you'd have maybe another ring color like I'm the king of file sending and sharing or whatever, or security. So that's something we might be able to do. Good idea.
My next question is,
Yep.
do you do that, so this is primarily, or this is only for Office 365, right?
So the question is if this is only for Office 365. Initially, yes. Initially, I have more influence on the Office side than I do on the other parts of the business. The idea is that this can be expanded out beyond productivity. Even within Office, though, Intune and Azure AD are going to be the EMS stuff will be part of this. But you could easily imagine, desktop settings that would be on Windows 10 related stuff fitting into this. It's just more modules that you'd create into it to where it all snaps and aligns to the same framework and same construct. Realistically, the way everything would work, I'm guessing that would be at least 6 to 12 months out after we get the initial rev of this running and then we show some kind of success in market. Then other people want to join and be part of that. So if we can get this out and running for the July-ish time frame, it would probably be the July of the next year that we would see more workloads like Windows or an Azure or additional workloads come into a Windows Server, for example. But yes, that's totally part of the vision.
So to be able to do that same thing for like on-prem, SharePoint,
I've got on-prem settings actually in the model as well. So I don't want to make this a cloud versus on-prem thing because you can do really, really good stuff on-prem. And that, I'd say there are a lot of opinions within Microsoft as well as to what the on-prem versus cloud component might be. For example, that level 4 must be cloud, but there are cases where I can get to level 4, I think, in an on-prem world because maybe I need data sovereignty or I need something. And if I'm running maybe all the right stuff, I've got Azure Stack running because my data has to be stored in Germany based on compliance laws there. I'm doing everything as kind of bleeding edge as I possibly can be. I think that's still worthy of a level 4 assignment in cases where I've got everything to that state, whether it's completely in the cloud or it's partially on-prem or hybrid or whatever. So you'll see on-prem and cloud in there. I just use Cloud I/O because it's more catchy and I think it will get more clicks. Any other questions? Yes? So as a partner, will there be a roll-up view that will show multiple customers, I'm guessing is what you're asking. So I'd have a dashboard of, like we can do with Iridius and some of the other things if you're monitoring. Part of the vision, probably not something that you'll see in July, but yes. I want to make sure that as a partner or as Fast Track or as MCS or as whomever, I can go in and lead the engagement. And then you can, the coolest thing, I used to be a systems integrator as well before I went to Microsoft. And if you come in and you say, hey, log in here, look at all this stuff that you have configured, here's all this stuff that you can do to actually make it even better, that's gold. I think from a partner perspective, it's almost more gold in the sense that a customer will have more intent, probably if they're hiring a partner to assess their environment and give them recommendations, as opposed to, a lot of times it's harder for IT to just start it one day and I wake up on September 1st and I'm like, hey, I want to make my services better. That can be a harder hill to climb at times, just politically inside of a company. Whereas if the company says, bring a partner in and help me get better and more, further along in terms of my IT, they're probably more conducive in a lot of cases for that. So yes, the intent would be partner. The dashboard stuff, I don't have it currently in scope, but it's something I'd love to add. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we'll end it 5 minutes early. Thank you all for being here, and I know there was some really historic competing stuff that was going on television, so I appreciate you taking the 75 minutes to be in this room today. And hopefully I will see you online. Go to Microsoft Mechanics, microsoft.com/mechanics, and you'll see me a lot on that channel for all the latest Microsoft stuff and news for IT pros. Thanks again.